When Emily said she was going to a party, I didn't pay attention, but there was a sparkle in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. 2 hours later, I received a photo of her in the arms of another man. My world fell apart, but that was only the beginning. I decided to find her, and what I saw in that motel changed everything. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a trap that I had to open. Jake leaned back on the worn leather couch in their small Seattle apartment, the hum of the TV filling the quiet evening air. He was 35, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a steady life, or so he thought. Across the room, Emily, his wife of 8 years, slipped on her jacket. She was 32, sharp-eyed and restless, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. "I'm heading to Kate's party downtown," she said, her voice casual but edged with something Jake couldn't quite place. Her eyes sparkled, more than they had for him in months. "Just drinks with the girls. Don't wait up." He nodded, forcing a smile. "Have fun." But as the door clicked shut behind her, a knot tightened in his gut. Things hadn't been right lately. Emily had been distant, late nights with vague excuses, her phone always buzzing, conversations cut short with a shrug. They'd been through rough patches before, sure, but this felt different, deeper, like she was slipping away, and he was too stubborn or too scared to admit it. The clock ticked past 9 p.m. Jake flipped channels, trying to drown out the unease creeping up his spine. She'd said it was just a party. Kate's crew was wild. Yep, booze, loud music, maybe some dancing, but nothing he couldn't handle. Or so he told himself. He'd always trusted her. 8 years of marriage had to mean something, right? But the flicker of doubt wouldn't fade. Not tonight. Then his phone buzzed on a coffee table. A text. No name. Just a number he didn't recognize. He opened it, and his breath caught. A photo loaded. Emily, caught mid-laugh, her arms wrapped around a guy he'd never seen before. Dark hair, leather jacket, smirking at the camera. They were close, too close. The background was dim, a blurry mix of neon lights and shadows, not Kate's usual bar. His heart slammed against his ribs. Who sent this? Why? He stared at the screen, the image burning into his mind. His thumb hovered over Emily's contact, itching to call, to demand answers. But what would he say? "Hey, caught you cheating already?" No. He needed more. He needed proof. His hands shook as he grabbed his phone tighter, opening the tracking app they'd installed last year when she'd lost her phone on a hiking trip. She'd laughed it off then, called him her personal GPS. Now it felt like a lifeline. The app loaded, and a red dot blinked on the map. Not downtown. Not Kate's place. It was pinned at the Red Line Motel, a rundown joint on the edge of town. Jake's stomach dropped. A motel? What the hell was she doing there? His mind raced. Anger, fear, betrayal crashing together. This wasn't just drinks with the girls. This was something else. Something she hadn't told him. He stood, pacing the cramped living room, the photo replaying in his head. Emily's smile. That guy's arm around her. The knot in his gut twisted into a fire. He could sit here, wait for her to come home with some half-baked lie. Or he could go find out the truth. The keys jangled in his hand as he made up his mind. He wasn't the type to storm off half-cocked, but tonight wasn't about playing it safe. Whatever she was hiding, he'd see it with his own eyes. Grabbing his jacket, he headed for the door, the Seattle rain already drumming against the windows. The Red Line was a 20-minute drive, maybe less if he floored it. His old pickup roared to life, and as he pulled onto the slick streets, one thought pounded in his skull. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. 8 years, and it came down to a blurry photo and a dot on a map. He didn't know what he'd find, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. The rain streaked across the windshield as Jake's pickup barreled down the highway, the Seattle skyline fading into a blur of gray behind him. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, the tracking app glowing on his phone in the passenger seat. The red hadn't moved, still pinned at the Red Line Motel, a seedy spot off, 5 known for cheap rooms and no questions. His pulse thumped in his ears, louder than the engine's growl. Emily was there, with some guy. The photo flashed in his mind again. Her laugh, that stranger's arm snaked around her waist. Who the hell was he? The wipers slapped back and forth, barely keeping up with the downpour. Jake's thoughts raced faster than the truck. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the app glitched, or the photo was old, doctored, anything but what it looked like. But deep down, he knew better. The late nights, the dodged questions, the way she'd pull away when he tried to touch her. It had been building for months. He'd ignored it, chalked it up to stress or work. Now it stared him in the face, sharp and ugly. Betrayal. He grabbed his phone, one hand on the wheel, and dialed Kate. If Emily wasn't at the party, Kate would know something. The call rang twice before her voice crackled through, hesitant. "Jake? Hey, what's up?" "Where's Emily?" he snapped, skipping pleasantries. The line went quiet for a beat too long. She was here," Kate said, her words stumbling. "But she left around 10. Said she had to meet someone." "I thought." "Meet someone." Jake cut in, his voice rising. "Who? Where?" "I don't know, man. She didn't say. She just took off." Kate's tone shifted, nervous. "Is everything okay?" "No, it's not," he growled, hanging up before she could respond. 10 o'clock. That was 2 hours ago. Plenty of time to get to the Red Lion. Plenty of time to... He stopped the thought, jaw clenching. He didn't want to picture it, but the images came anyway. Emily in a dimly lit room, that guy from the photo leaning in close. His foot pressed harder on the gas. The motel's neon sign flickered into view through the rain, a faded Red Lion buzzing against the night sky. Jake pulled into the lot, tires skidding on wet gravel. He scanned the row of cars, his breath hitching when he spotted hers. Emily's blue Honda, tucked near the far end. Confirmation. She was here. No more excuses, no more maybes. His chest tightened as he killed the engine, the silence swallowing him whole. He stepped out, the rain soaking through his jacket in seconds. The motel was a dump, peeling paint, cracked windows, the kind of place you went to disappear. Room numbers glowed faintly above each door. 101, 102, 103. The app didn't give an exact room, but her car was a dead giveaway. He moved fast, boots splashing through puddles, eyes locked on the row ahead. The dot blinked steady on his phone, taunting him. Closer now. Too close. A shadow moved behind a curtain in room 108. Jake froze, heart slamming against his ribs. Was that her? He shoved the phone in his pocket and approached, the rain masking his steps. The blinds were cracked, light spilling out in thin slivers. He leaned in, straining to see, but the angle was wrong, just shapes, no faces. His fist hovered over the door. Knock. Barge in? Every instinct screamed to tear it down, but something held him back. Fear, maybe, or the last shred of hope that this wasn't what it seemed. Then he heard it, a muffled laugh. Hers. Unmistakable. The sound hit him like a punch, knocking the air from his lungs. 8 years, and he still knew that laugh anywhere. But it wasn't for him. Not tonight. Rage flared hot in his chest, drowning out the doubt. He pounded on the door, once, twice, hard enough to rattle the frame. The laughter stopped. Silence. Then footsteps, quick and panicked. The door cracked open, and there she was, Emily, pale and wide-eyed, staring at him like he was a ghost. The motel door hung ajar, a sliver of yellow light spilling into the rain-soaked night. Emily stood there, frozen, her face drained of color. Her dark hair was tangled, mascara streaked under her eyes like she'd been crying or caught off guard. "Jake," she hissed, her voice a jagged whisper. Her gaze darted past him, scanning the parking lot as if she expected someone else to leap out of the shadows. Behind her, the room was dim, but he could make out a figure, a man, tall and broad, lurking just out of sight. "What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded, stepping forward to block the doorway. Her tone was sharp, defensive, but her hands trembled. Jake didn't answer. He shoved past her, the door banging open against the wall. The air inside reeked of stale smoke and cheap cologne. The man from the photo, leather jacket, dark hair, stood near the bed, his posture stiff. The sheets were mussed, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the nightstand. Jake's stomach churned. Every detail screamed the truth he dreaded. "Jake, stop." Emily grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. He yanked free, rounding on her. "Stop. You're in a motel with him." He jabbed a finger at the guy, who hadn't moved, just watched, eyes cold and calculating. "Who is he, him? What's this?" His voice cracked, raw with fury and hurt. 8 years of trust shattered in a single frame. The photo, her laugh, this room. "It's not what you think," she said, her words tumbling out fast. "Please, just listen." But the man cut her off, stepping forward with a slow, deliberate stride. "You should have stayed home, buddy." His voice was gravelly, edged with menace. Then Jake saw it. a glint of metal as the guy pulled a handgun from his jacket, leveling it at Jake's chest. The room tilted. This wasn't just an affair. This was something else. Put that down. Emily shrieked, lunging between them. Her eyes were wild, pleading. Jake, he's not. I'm not cheating. I'm in trouble. Trouble. Jake's laugh was bitter, his gaze flicking between the gun and her panicked face. What kind of trouble ends up in a motel with a guy packing heat? She swallowed hard, her breath shallow. I owe money. Bad people. He's here to collect. She gestured at the man, who smirked, twirling the gun like it was a toy. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you dragged into it. Bullshit, Jake spat, but doubt crept in. Her fear looked real, too real. You expect me to believe that? After the lies? The photo. It's true, the man said, his smirk fading. She's got debts with the wrong crowd. I'm just the messenger. But you, he stepped closer, the barrel steady. You're a problem now. Jake's mind raced. Debts? What debts? They weren't rich, but they'd always scraped by. Was she gambling? Drugs? He'd never seen a sign. Yet here she was, trembling, trapped between him and a loaded gun. How much? He barked, glaring at her. 10 grand, she whispered, eyes dropping. I thought I could handle it. Borrow from some guys downtown. It got out of control. 10 grand. His voice boomed, echoing off the thin walls. And you hid this from me? Before she could answer, the man lunged, slamming Jake against the wall. The gun pressed cold against his temple. Enough chit-chat. She's got till tomorrow. You want to play hero? That's on you. Emily sobbed, clutching the guy's arm. Don't hurt him. I'll get the money, I swear. Jake's pulse hammered, adrenaline flooding his veins. He stared into her eyes. Fear, guilt, desperation. Was she a victim or a liar? The gun clicked, safety off. He had seconds to decide. The motel room felt like a cage, the air thick with tension and the metallic tang of fear. The gun pressed harder against Jake's temple, cold and unyielding, while the man in the leather jacket loomed over him. His smirk was gone, replaced by a steely glare. Time's ticking, sweetheart, he growled at Emily, who stood trembling a few feet away, her hands raised as if she could stop this with sheer will. You've got till tomorrow, or it's not just your husband here who pays. Please don't. Emily's voice broke, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Jake, eyes wide with panic. I didn't mean for this. I swear I'll fix it. Jake's mind spun, pinned against the wall by the thug's forearm and the threat of the barrel. 10 grand. Debts. Bad people. Her words rattled in his skull, each one a shard of glass cutting through 8 years of marriage. Was this real? Or was it another lie, a performance to drag him into her mess? He searched her face, guilt, terror, desperation, but he couldn't tell anymore. The woman he'd loved was a stranger now. Fix it how? He rasped, his voice hoarse from the pressure on his throat. You've been lying for months, hiding this? Who are these people? They're from downtown, she stammered. I borrowed cash to cover some bills. Thought I could pay it back with a side gig. It spiraled. I didn't want you to know. A side gig. The man snorted, easing the gun back an inch, but keeping it trained on Jake. Tell him the truth, princess. She's been running errands for the crew, small stuff deliveries, till she screwed up and lost a package. Jake's stomach twisted. Deliveries? Crew? This wasn't just a loan gone wrong. This was a damn crime ring. You're telling me you're a mule for some gang? He said, disbelief lacing his words. And you thought I wouldn't notice? I didn't have a choice, she cried, stepping closer. They threatened me, said they'd come after us both if I didn't play along. Shut it, the man snapped, shoving Jake harder into the wall. You're lucky I don't end this now. She's got one day. You want to save her, cough up the cash, or walk away. He leaned in, breath hot against Jake's ear. But you don't look like the hero type. Jake's fists clenched, rage simmering beneath the fear. Walk away? After everything? Part of him wanted to let her drown in the mess she'd made. But then he heard it, a faint wail of sirens in the distance, growing louder. Someone had called the cops, maybe a nosy neighbor hearing the shouts. The man froze, head snapping toward the window. Damn it, he muttered, loosening his grip. Jake seized the chance, driving his elbow into the guy's gut. The thug grunted, stumbling back, and the gun clattered to the floor. Emily screamed, diving for it, but Jake was faster. He snatched it up, hands shaking as he pointed it at the man. Stay down, he roared, adrenaline pumping. The sirens were closer now, red and blue lights flickered through the blinds. The man raised his hands, smirking despite the shift. "You're in over your head, pal. Jake, please." Emily grabbed his arm, her voice frantic. "We can run. Get out before they get here. I'll explain everything." "Run." He shook her off, the gun steady in his grip. "You dragged me into this. Lied to my face, and now you want me to save you?" Her eyes pleaded, but all he saw was the chaos she'd unleashed. The door rattled as boots pounded outside, cops yelling to open up. He had seconds. Trust her and flee, or let the law take her. And maybe him too? The truth hung between them, sharp and uncertain. The motel room pulsed with chaos as the sirens screamed closer, red and blue lights slashing through the rain-streaked blinds. Jake stood over the thug, the gun heavy in his trembling hands, its weight a lifeline and a curse. The man in the leather jacket smirked up at him from the floor, hands half raised, daring him to pull the trigger. Emily clutched at Jake's arm, her voice a desperate plea. "We can still get out. Please, Jake, don't let them take me." Her eyes were wet, wild, but he couldn't read them anymore. Truth or lies, it all blurred together. "Open the door. Police." The shout rattled the walls, followed by a fist pounding on the frame. Jake's heart slammed against his ribs. Run with her? Fight? Or step back and let this unravel? 8 years of marriage flashed through his mind. Laughter, quiet nights, promises, now tainted by her secrets. Debts, gangs, a life he'd never known. The gun shook in his grip. He wasn't a killer. He wasn't her savior either. "Jake," she begged, but he pulled away, decision hardening in his chest. He dropped the gun to the floor with a dull thud, kicking it toward the wall. "It's over, Em," he said, voice low, final. Her face crumpled, a sob breaking free as the door burst open. Cops stormed in, shouting orders, hands up, down on the ground, guns drawn. The thug cursed, flattening himself as they swarmed him. Emily staggered back, hands raised, her cries drowned by the chaos. Jake didn't resist when an officer grabbed his arm, cuffing him roughly. "You're coming too," the cop barked. He didn't fight it. Whatever happened now, he was done carrying her weight. Hours later, the precinct was a sterile blur. Harsh lights, stale coffee, questions he answered with numb honesty. The photo, the tracker, the motel. The gun wasn't his, he told them, and the thug's rap sheet backed him up. A hired muscle for a downtown crew. Emily's story spilled out in interrogation. She'd been running drugs to pay off a loan, lost a shipment, got in deep. The cops let Jake go. No charges, just a warning to stay clear. She wasn't so lucky. He walked out into the gray Seattle dawn. The rain finally stopped. His truck sat in a lot. Keys returned with a curt nod from the desk sergeant. He climbed in, the silence wrapping around him like a shroud. Home was a few miles away, their apartment, her things, a life he couldn't face yet. Instead, he drove past it, past the city limits, the road stretching into the unknown. At a gas station hour out, he pulled over, grabbed his phone, and scrolled through old photos. Emily smiling on a hike their wedding day. "Lies now, everyone." He deleted them, fingers steady, then tossed the device onto the seat. The cab smelled of oil and freedom. He rummaged through the glove box, found a crumpled pack of smokes. Hers, left from months ago. Lighting one, he exhaled, watching the smoke curl into the crisp air. The radio crackled on, an old rock tune filling the quiet. Jake leaned back, the horizon wide ahead. He didn't know where he'd land, maybe a buddy's couch, maybe a new town. The news would hit soon, Emily's arrest, the scandal, but it wasn't his story anymore. She'd made her choices. Now he made his. He shifted into gear, the engine rumbling to life. For the first time in years, the weight lifted, not all at once, but enough. The road was his. A new beginning, rough and raw, but his alone.